Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Lines podcast. Today we have Idan Ninyo, the co-founder and CEO of Bionic. It is an application for security posture management, ASPM company. We'll learn more about what that means and more about the story behind it. But Idan, thank you so much for joining the show. I'm really excited to have you on here. And before we get into all the good stuff, what were you doing before you started Bionic?
Yeah, so before I started Bionic, I'm basically a software engineer, right?
Yeah.
So I think where I first started my journey was in the Israeli intelligence corps. So I was in what many people know as 8200, which is like
Uh-huh.
basically the equivalent of the NSA just out of Israel.
Yeah.
And I was doing offensive cybersecurity for almost 7 years of my life. Then I did a little bit of startups. I was one of Magic Leap's first employees out of Israel. And about 3 years ago, we decided to found Bionic together with my co-founder.
Amazing. What did you do? You said offensive security. What does that mean?
Yeah, so for obvious reason, can't talk much to that too much, but basically, cybersecurity is a means to getting intelligence.
Sure. Yeah. And in that experience, what got you excited about, you could have continued in cybersecurity and in military, but you chose to go the more, technology route. What got you excited about tech and jumping into, software?
Yeah, so actually, I did a lot of software back in the military. That was my day to day. The reason I decided to leave was um, that's a good one. So obviously it was also very, very hard decision. I think what's good about, eventually serving your country and the greater good at the end of the day is the fact that you feel like you have purpose
Yeah.
and you're working not only for yourself, right?
Yeah.
And that was actually what I was also missing when I worked at Magic Leap at the end of the day. And that's why eventually I decided to found my own company to
Yeah.
kind of really look for the purpose and see how I'm doing a lot of impact my
Sure.
day to day. So that's
Yeah.
something that always led me. And I think, yeah,
Yeah, that's incredible. And I was learning a little bit more about your background. You worked for a company, Wild Ventures.
yeah,
And tell me a little bit about that experience. It seems like you were helping invest in other businesses and other cybersecurity entrepreneurs in Israel in particular. How was that experience like? Kind of on a, it seems like on a VC, in a VC perspective.
yeah, that's a great question. So basically, before doing my own thing, when I realized I want to do that, I realized I also want a little bit of business experience and
Yeah.
try to experience how the other side looks at tech, right? How do we
Hmm.
evaluate markets? How do we look at what is even considered to be good as a company? What
Yeah.
metrics should I aspire to? And so on. So I decided to leverage my experience in cybersecurity and join a VC that specializes in cybersecurity. And that's why I
Hmm.
decided to join YL. And that's basically what I got from there. It was my first, let's call it this way, foot in the door in the
Yeah.
business world.
Yeah.
And we invested with, for example, one of the first companies that did cloud security and container security back then, which has obviously also opened the gate to what
Yeah.
Bionic is doing right now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's so fascinating how you transition not only from a technology standpoint, but then from a business standpoint in the VC realm. I feel like from that perspective, there's always so much to learn about the repetitions of making a successful business. Tell me a little bit about what you've learned in that experience and then now with Bionic, on how, successful businesses run or successful startups run. Um, what's your perspective or what's your experience on how companies are successful?
Yeah, so I think it's a combination of three things, especially when you're looking at cybersecurity, right? First of all, you need to target a very big problem, right?
Mhm.
Cybersecurity suffers from a lot of point solutions that are targeting very small problems, even feature solutions. But eventually, when you want to build a successful company, a big company, like even when you look at Bionic and the rate that you've been expanding and growing over the last few months and 2 years, basically, you
Mhm.
have to tackle a very, very big market that ties to eventually a very, very big problem. Right?
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
something we saw consistently. The second thing is obviously execution. So it's
Yeah.
great that you have a huge problem. You also need to execute and build a great solution in order to eventually solve this problem.
Yeah.
And the third piece of that is culture.
Yeah.
So I think these are the three most important base stones eventually in order to building a very successful company.
Amazing. Yeah. Yeah. What was the inspiration behind Bionic? You've gone, you've had the cybersecurity experience from the military, then in the VC realm and working with startups. And what was the inspiration for starting your own company, especially within cybersecurity? Was it, you already having the expertise, or did you see something in particular that was, an issue or problem or something that needed to be, focused on in cybersecurity that led you to start Bionic?
Yeah, so that was an interesting route. So basically, when I did venture capital, what I saw is that everybody are becoming a software company, right? And I
Yeah.
saw the kind of customers software companies had, and I was amazed to see that suddenly fast food companies are consuming cloud technology and have a lot of developers. And
Hmm.
I saw internally all the challenges they are going through while transforming there. And we had a thesis back then of everybody is going to be a software company. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
So that's when we kind of started looking. Uh, and then what we did, I think many of eventually the customers knows what their problems are. They don't necessarily know how to solve them, but they know what their problems are. They know
Right.
much better than we do, right? Uh, so we literally, we were very humble about it and we just interviewed. We interviewed about over the course of 2 months, something like 50, 60
Yeah.
CIOs, CTOs, CISOs of Fortune 500 companies. And we basically just asked them about their problems. What problems are they experiencing? We haven't even talked about a solution. We didn't try to sell anything. We didn't have anything to sell. Just wanted to understand what problems they're experiencing. And they told us. And they, all of us has this sort of like pattern recognition mechanism.
Sure.
And it really kicked in when everybody told us the same thing about we're a software company. Our developers are moving very, very quickly. And we're today in a position where we don't even know how many applications we're running in our production environments. And it's
Wow.
just growing bigger and getting worse day by day. And that's when we realized we were onto something. And that's where we kind of started our journey.
So was the issue with these companies that they were having so much, I guess, like successful productivity within the development team, but they didn't have enough either security around these applications? What exactly was, the problem that they were facing?
Yeah. So I can walk you through an example. So think about it this. So you're an organization, you have thousands of developers, right? You have no idea what you're doing and they're doing, right? So how can you secure and compliant what you don't even know about? So that's where it starts, right? And then later on, we're in a position where we have thousands of developers, each one pushes a few changes a day to production. And one small change can basically put the entire business at risk. Giving an example of one of our customers, who is a very big insurance company in the US, they had an incident last October where a developer was working on a microservice that was processing financial information of US customers, millions of them. And the developer didn't know that because it wasn't documented anywhere. Developers are not very well known for, documenting what they're doing.
Yeah. Okay.
And he was pretty new to the company, and he actually accidentally started sending data from these microservices out of the organization to a third party that started showing it in their photo. So this is just an example of how Bionic, like the problem that we help eventually solving.
Yeah.
And obviously we have a very cool tech that helps us do that as well.
Yeah. No, I love that.
Problems we kept on hearing about.
Yeah. Yeah. But tell us a little, I always am always fascinated as, the threat of cybersecurity grows, and I was talking to another founder who has started a cybersecurity company. And he was just talking to me. His particular was, ransomware. And, it was interesting to see how these, teams of people are they're almost companies now, and they grow, and they're no longer, a hacker in a hoodie in his mother's basement, right? Which is, we fantasize about that or have that in our media. but they're like, structured teams and run like companies and operations.
Yeah.
What are the different ways that you see or that companies are under threat from cyber security attack?
Yeah. So I think it's two things. The first thing is obviously there are a lot of attackers out there. Cybersecurity and adversaries is a well-oiled machine, and it's organizations and that's what they do, right?
Yeah.
So this is obviously one aspect that they target eventually companies in order to cause, in order to blackmail them, in order to sell their data in the black market, and so on, so on, so on. So obviously there is that. When you're looking at critical infrastructure like banking, power, and so on, so on, so on, organizations, and you look and you can see it also from the SolarWinds attack that happened, need to also protect themselves from state-sponsored attacks, which is a completely different story, right?
Yeah.
I think the third aspect of that is also sometimes people are just making mistakes that eventually can compromise the organization. And I would even say that's probably 80% of the incidents. It's not a cybersecurity attack, but it's a cybersecurity incident that happens. So that's another very, very big portion. And that's what you see a lot on the cloud security and application security space. It's not about adversaries, not necessarily about adversaries. It's a lot of times it's about, cloud is new.
Yeah.
For most companies, they move to the cloud only in the last 2 or 3 years, even sometimes even newer than that. But with that being said, the developers, they're not straight out of college. They've never developed for the cloud. They don't necessarily even know, and they were never expected to write secure code over the cloud.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the problem. That's a problem we see a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are some ways that Bionic kind of helps alleviate that problem within companies?
Yeah. So that's eventually what we do, right? So it all starts with eventual information, right? In order to secure something, you first of all need to know what it is and what you're secure, right? You cannot secure what you don't know about, right? It's the basics of cybersecurity. You have to start with knowing. By the way, same with ransomware. You need to know what do you have ransomware deployed. So Bionic first starts with giving you this information, mapping all of your applications that run in production, right? So that's the first piece, mapping everything out, understanding the architectures and how it works at scale. Because organizations that are growing, they keep on growing. Microservices architectures are very, very, very complex. And you need to understand them in an automated fashion. So that's the first thing that Bionic does. The second thing that we do is we map this architecture and all the information we have into risk insights. So many times the problem, okay, you have all this information, but how do I consume it? Many times security teams struggle because they just don't have enough personnel, right? The organization is scaling. There is more developers. There are more microservices. Everything is scaling, but the security team remains around the same. It cannot scale in a linear way. So you have to give them insight on what's most important for them to fix. So that's the second thing that we do. The third thing that we do, now we do it in a continuous fashion. So whenever a developer makes a change to production, we let the organization know whether this change introduced any new risk to their production or posing any new risk from security or compliance standpoint. So these are like the 3 pillars that we give organizations in order to eventually help them secure their cloud and application environments.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And so tell me a little bit more about the traction. You created a great system, this great technology. You work, with teams on creating just a secure application environment. Where is Bionic now? What are the companies you're working with? Where is your funding at? And kind of what are the next stages of growth for Bionic?
Yeah. So we grew this year from around 40 people to 120 people. We raised Bionic like even though we are 3 years old, even a bit less than that, we raised around $90 million of capital.
Amazing.
And we had a B round last March, led by Inside Partners. So that's where we are from a company standpoint and capital and HR perspective. In terms of traction, so with cybersecurity, sometimes it's a problem exposing the customer needs. But what I say is that we're working with the largest banks in the US, largest financial institutions, largest insurance firms, automotive companies, uh, retailers, fast food companies, pharmaceuticals, basically almost everybody, and tech companies, obviously. We're seeing this problem spans across verticals, and
Yeah.
basically almost any company with more than 150 developers, which is basically almost everybody, are experiencing it.
Yeah, no, that's incredible, and congrats on all the success. What is like a contributor to that success? And you described companies that are successful have strong execution, great culture, and then I think one more variable you described. But what about your execution has led to Bionic being so successful in such a short amount of time?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is about talent.
Yeah,
We are we're only as good as our people at the end of the day, and that's something we firmly believe in. Um, so all of the people in Bionic are people that I'm proud to be working with on a personal level, and I think they're all better than me. So that's my hiring technique. I want to constantly hire people that are much, much smarter than me. And I think and all of the managers in here have been very, very successful in doing that. So that's the first piece. Uh, Now, the second thing about execution that I feel is very important for startups is being able to focus down. As a startup, founders and this entrepreneur, the first thing you want to do is like boil the ocean. You want to solve everything at once. Uh, but unfortunately, you can't do that. Like you're an organization with finite resources. And like when you look at us, we're trying to also build a new market. And building a new market is a difficult task. And you can only do that if you're very, very focused on, first of all, our customers' pain. Like customer pain is the thing that leads us the most. And that's and everybody also has to be aligned on it across the organization, whether it's sales, marketing, developers, product. Everybody has to be aligned around what pain are we solving to our customers. And then they have to be very, very aligned on what do we need to do in order to do that. And eventually, if you solve someone a pain, you can make them successful. And that's
yeah,
how we believe we can grow a business. We're in the business of selling people value, not necessarily selling product. We need to sell them value, and you can only sell value if you solve them a pain point
yeah,
and you make them
yeah.
successful.
No, that's awesome to hear. And tell me a little bit about the culture piece. So, you're aligned on execution, you're focused on the problem that you're solving. Everyone is kind of all hyper focused on that one problem and then executing at each stage of the process. How do you maintain a strong culture within an environment that can be seen as stressful or high velocity? There's a lot of different ways founders like to make sure that they maintain a strong culture. What are some ways that you maintain a strong culture within your team?
Yeah. So first of all, it's difficult and you need to admit it's difficult, right? And you need to be very proactive about maintaining this strong culture and strongly talk and constantly talk about it, right?
Yeah.
And be very clear about what your culture is and have everybody aligned around what the culture is. So I think we're doing three things. The first, we're a startup. It's difficult as it is, and we're also creating a new market. So we expect every employee to give their best to eventually help the company achieve its goals. That's the only thing we can ask you for, to do your best. The second thing is, we strongly believe that managers need to lead by examples and have this mentality that there's no job that's too small for me to do. And I'm also leading that personally. There is nothing I won't do in order to help a customer, give them value, help get a deal done, even help the engineers. There's nothing anyone in here won't do in order to eventually make the company more successful. And that's something that's extremely important. I would say the third thing is that's very important for us. We have a very, very strict no joke policy because, as you said, it's hard, it's stressful. So you need to be in a place and work with people that you want to work with. And you need to also have fun, or at least try to have fun and have people you can have fun with during this
Yeah.
process. Otherwise, honestly, life is too short. So we have no problem turning down top talent if we don't think they'll be fun to work with.
Yeah.
And we constantly only hire the best people that live by our values.
I love that, and I love the no judge policy. It's simple but effective, and I agree. You know, there's so many challenges you face, so many problems, and the way we focus it in our company is every problem's the opportunity. You know, we treat every problem as an opportunity, and when you work with people who kind of view things in that perspective, and you don't get down or don't have kind of like it's such a visceral emotional response, and just kind of collaborate as team members. It's just such a great environment and leads to such quick productivity and success. One thing I always like to ask founders as they're growing and scaling their companies is about risks that they face. So what are some of the biggest risks that your company faces today?
I don't know if risk is the right word, but we do face some challenges. I think the most straightforward challenge we had to face with was the remote work.
Mm.
We came from culture that we never did it before. And now everybody, like on the US side of Bionic, in Israel, we work from the office, but on the US side, they do work remotely. It was a very also cautious decision to keep it as such, but obviously it also creates a lot of challenges, like alignment, making people feel like they're part of the company, and so on.
Yeah. What are some ways that you kind of, because I hear this a lot and sounds like
Yeah.
you have a hybrid working environment. Like what are some strategies that you implement at a systemic level that helps people still become, you know, feel as though they're part of the company and also kind of maintain, and I'm sure with cybersecurity, there's some kind of securities around having people work at home and just keeping everything kind of bottled in there. What are some strategies that you use?
So I think the first thing is around alignment, being part of the company. So making sure everybody understands what everybody are doing, like they would be if they were to work in the same office. So it means a lot of communication, all hands. Every executive has to present at least quarterly what he's doing by himself, not as part of their whole hands. We're doing a concept of like blind dates between different people in the organization. So that's
Yeah.
the first. The second piece is, again, in order to make people feel like they're part of something, which they are, is around celebrating successes, big and
Yeah.
small. So that's something we will encourage across the organization. Um, I would say these are the two pieces we're trying to
Yeah.
really focus on.
Amazing. Amazing. I'm curious, you know, just within your experience, what makes your job hard?
What doesn't? Uh, what makes my job hard? I think what makes every CEO's job hard, especially such a in a business that scales very, very quickly, is the fact that your job changes
Yeah.
every quarter or so. Every quarter or so, you have to kind of reinvent yourself and
Mhm.
stop for a second and understand, am I currently doing what's best for the company and what's most important?
Yeah.
And that's something that I personally constantly need to do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great answer. You know, if everything goes well and, you know, obviously it's been going well with the success you've seen recently, but if everything goes well with Bionic, where do you see the long-term vision of the company?
So obviously we want to be one of the most prominent software companies, enterprise software companies in the world. That's what we're aiming at. The executive we brought on are people that have done exactly this. We brought executive from GitLab, AppDynamics,
Yeah.
and those sort of like multi-billion-dollar companies. So they'll be able to take us to this basically place of like post-IPO company.
Yeah.
That's what I would consider a success.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. Well, thank you. I love, you know, hearing your story, your background. Obviously, you know, would love to learn more about the military experience, but I understand not being able to go too deep into that. Really excited about what you've done with Bionic and where it's leading to and how it's really influencing, and allowing the companies to scale their, applications, but also in a way that allows them to be secure, and consumer secure too, because I think, you know, that's another piece is when you're building software, really thinking about the company, the consumer's best interest and the user's best interest. I always like to ask this question, not only for my own personal research, but for my audience as well to get more information. But tell me a little bit. I love this bonus question. But what are some books or some people that have influenced you the most?
So currently, I'm actually reading a pretty good book that I would recommend any founder, MP'd Up by Frank
Answer.
Altman.
Love it. Well, give us a little snippet. What have you learned so far from that book?
Yeah, he talks a lot about how to build. So Frank was the CEO of ServiceNow. Now he's the CEO of Snowflake.
Yeah.
Talks a lot about how to build culture at the end of the day, and how to align everyone around this culture.
Yeah, amazing.
Which is a very big challenge for them.
Right. Well, thank you, Idan, so much for answering all my questions and being on the show. I hope you had a fun time. And, I'm really excited to see where you take Bionic, where Bionic leads to in terms of its success and its growth. But again, man, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome.